Welcome to the Uncanny Valley podcast. This is the deep dive, where we take a single source, sometimes a stack of sources, and really unpack the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight.
Yeah, really get into it.
Today, we're plunging into one of the most famous texts in the English language, William Shakespeare's The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet.
And our source material for this dive is a readily accessible one. The electronic text freely available from Project Gutenberg.
Oh, right, Project Gutenberg.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource that puts classic literature now in the public domain directly into your hands digitally, completely free of charge, and with very few restrictions. Great stuff.
Our mission with this text is to go beyond just reciting the plot you probably already know. We want to explore the characters, the key decisions, the moments of miscommunication and chance, and the overarching forces, as revealed only through Shakespeare's words in this specific text, that drive this iconic, devastating narrative.
Right from the start, the play sets the scene in fair Verona, a city immediately defined by conflict. The prologue tells us about two households, both alike in dignity, locked in an ancient grudge that has erupted into violent new mutiny. This civil strife stains the very hands of the citizens.
And unusually, the prologue gives away the ending up front. The chorus, our narrator for these initial 14 lines, tells us explicitly about a pair of star-crossed lovers from these feuding families who will tragically take their life.
It even states the outcome of their death. It doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The play isn't hiding the ending, it's inviting us to watch how it happens, to understand the journey over the 2 hours traffic of our stage.
Right. It shifts our focus from what happens to why and how. It's a bold move, really.
Definitely. Tells you something about where the real drama lies for Shakespeare.
So let's open this Project Gutenberg text and get into Act 1. The source includes a character list early on, giving us a roadmap of who we'll meet. The Montagues, the Capulets, Prince Escalus, Friar Lawrence, Paris, Mercutio, and others.
Act 1. Scene I throws us immediately into the conflict, starting with the lowest members of the two houses, the servants. We meet Samson and Gregory of the Capulets, trading crude jokes filled with aggression, ready to provoke any Montague they encounter.
Their dialogue is earthy and violent, showing how deeply the feud has seeped into the everyday life of the city. Samson's boast about being civil with the maids after fighting the men, clarifying he means maidenheads, sets a tone of aggression mixed with bawdy humor. You know, right from the get-go.
Absolutely. And their encounter with Abro and Balthazar, the Montague servants, quickly escalates. Samson initiates the classic insult, "I will bite my thumb at them," which is disgrace to them if they bear it.
That whole thumb-biting thing, it's such a specific, provocative gesture.
It is, and he dances around the legality, saying he bites his thumb, but not at them specifically, trying to provoke a fight without technically starting it.
Benvolio, Romeo's cousin and friend, enters trying to break up the fight, urging them to part fools, put up your swords, you know not what you do. He tries to be the voice of reason and peace. But the arrival of Tybalt, Lady Capulet's nephew, immediately extinguishes any hope of peace. Tybalt sees Benvolio with his sword out, even if it's for peacekeeping, and challenges him instantly. His hatred for Montagues is absolute, declaring peace. "I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee."
Wow. No room for doubt there.
None at all. He embodies the feud's irrational hatred.
This fiery antagonism quickly draws in the heads of both families, old Capulet and Montague, who are ready to fight each other despite their age, showing the depth and irrationality of the feud. It's just ingrained.
Completely. The prince arrives, exasperated by the repeated public brawls. This is the third. His decree is a clear ultimatum. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace.
He's laying down the law, serious consequences now.
Exactly. It establishes the severe, potentially fatal consequences of the family's inability to maintain order.
So the stage is set. A city consumed by hate, simmering violence ready to ignite over the smallest provocation, and a prince who has issued a death sentence for the next public disturbance.
Yet right after this scene of public rage, the focus shifts dramatically to Romeo's internal state. Montague tells Benvolio that Romeo is withdrawn and melancholy, hiding in his room during the day, as if creating an artificial night.
Which sounds very teenage angsty, but Shakespeare digs deeper.
He does. Benvolio agrees to find out what's troubling him. When Romeo appears, his language is full of contradictions, a sign of his lovesickness. He sees the aftermath of the brawl he'd just missed and says, "Oh me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all." He's present but distant, already lost in his own world.
Lost in his head.
Totally. He describes his state as having lost myself. I am not here. This is not Romeo. He's suffering from unrequited love for a woman whom we later learn is Rosaline, who has sworn a life of chastity.
Ah, Rosaline. the first object of his affection.
Indeed. His language about love is rich but conflicted, describing it as something that can seem gentle in his view, but is actually tyrannous and rough in proof. He calls love blind. Very dramatic.
Benvolio's practical advice is to move on. Take thou some new infection to thy eye, and the rank poison of the old will die. Basically, look at other women.
Good, sensible advice.
But Romeo is consumed by his current sorrow. He rejects Benvolio's suggestion, saying he can't not teach me to forget. He argues that seeing other beautiful women would only remind him of Rosaline's superior beauty, like someone who has gone blind can't forget the sight they lost.
He's really leaning into the suffering here.
Oh, yeah. So, Act Scene I leaves us with the city defined by outward public hate and Romeo defined by inward private sorrow, completely unaware that both are about to collide.
A perfect setup. Moving to Act 1, Scene 2, we see Capulet speaking with Paris about his desire to marry Juliet. Capulet seems hesitant, noting Juliet is not yet 14, and suggesting Paris wait 2 more summers.
That sounds surprisingly reasonable considering what comes later.
It does give an initial impression that Capulet is a somewhat caring father, considering his daughter's youth. However, he does invite Paris to the feast that night, giving him permission to woo her, implying a degree of agency for Juliet, but setting up the expectation.
Okay. And this scene introduces a key moment of chance. Capulet gives a servant a guest list to invite to the feast, but the servant is illiterate. He complains he must the learned to read it.
Right, a classic bit of plot mechanics. He happens upon Romeo and Benvolio. This is where fate, or simply bad luck, takes a turn. The servant asks Romeo to read the list.
And Romeo reads it.
And sees the name that matters to him, my fair niece, Rosaline. The servant, following Capulet's instructions to invite anyone not of the Montague house, unknowingly invites Romeo to the Capulet feast.
Oh, the irony. Invites his sworn enemy.
Exactly. Benvolio immediately seizes the opportunity, urging Romeo to go not for Rosaline, but to compare her to others, promising to make him think thy swan a crow.
Trying to cure him with more beauty.
That's the plan. Romeo agrees, but his stated reason is purely to see Rosaline, to rejoice in splendor of my own. He goes, still fixed on his old love, completely unaware of the transformative encounter waiting for him.
He has no idea his life is about to change forever.
Not at all. Act 1, Scene 3, shifts to room in Capulet's house, where we finally meet Juliet, seen first through the eyes of her nurse and mother. Lady Capulet wants to talk about marriage, and this requires establishing Juliet's age.
And the nurse steps in. She's quite a character.
She really is. Vital, earthy. Her long, rambling monologue about Juliet's age is full of life and body humor. She confirms Juliet isn't 14 yet, but will be on Lammas Eve, about 2 weeks away.
How does she remember the exact date?
She uses the detail of an earthquake 11 years prior when Juliet was weaned and could walk as her reference point.
Oh.
Her story about her late husband joking about little Juliet falling backward when she's older and Juliet saying "I" is both funny and shows the nurse's deep, intimate connection with Juliet from infancy.
It establishes that bond right away.
Absolutely. Lady Capulet brings the conversation back to Paris, describing him in idealized terms. Verona's summer hath not such a flower, calling him a man of wax, meaning perfectly formed.
Like a perfect statue.
Precisely. The nurse's enthusiastic agreement, he's a flower, in faith a very flower, echoes this praise.
Lady Capulet's argument for the marriage is practical. Juliet will gain honor and wealth by marrying Paris, comparing him to a book and Juliet to its cover. The nurse adds a double meaning with, women grow by men.
Always ready with the earthy comment, the nurse.
So what does Juliet say to all this?
Juliet's response is incredibly measured and obedient. All look to like, if looking liking move, but no more deep will I endart mine eye, than your consent gives strength to make it fly. She will consider him only if her parents approve.
Wow, that's dutiful. Very different from the Juliet we see later.
Exactly. This shows her initial deference to authority, which makes her later defiance all the more impactful.
Okay, good point. Act 1, Scene the Firth, finds Romeo, Mercutio, and Benvolio on a street, heading to the Capulet feast, masked. They decide against a formal entrance speech, preferring to just dance and enjoy themselves.
Romeo, still weighed down by his lovesickness for Rosaline, feeling he has a soul of lead, preventing him from joining in the dancing, still moping.
And this is where Mercutio really shines, right?
Oh, yes. It's here that Mercutio, always the witty, cynical counterpoint to Romeo's idealism, launches into his famous Queen Mab speech. It's a wildly imaginative description of a tiny fairy who visits people in their dreams.
It's such a strange, brilliant speech.
It really is. He describes her chariot made from improbable materials like a hazelnut shell and spider's legs drawn by little atomies. He details the dreams she brings to various people, lovers, courtiers, lawyers, ladies, soldiers.
Vivid stuff, but what's the point of it all?
Well, the speech is vivid and fantastical, but it carries a cynical undercurrent. Mercutio describes dreams as the children of an idle brain, begot of nothing but vain fantasy.
So he's saying dreams are meaningless. And maybe love too.
That's the implication. It suggests that intense passions and desires, like Romeo's love, are ultimately flimsy and meaningless, mere products of an idle brain. It's a direct challenge to Romeo's deeply felt, fate-driven view of love.
A dose of cynical reality from Mercutio.
Always. Despite Mercutio's attempt to inject realism, Romeo retains a sense of foreboding about the night, fearing it will lead to some vile forfeit of untimely death. He feels his fate is out of his hands, submitting himself to "he that hath the steerage of my course."
That sense of fate again, he feels pulled along by it.
Very much so. Finally, Act 1, Scene V brings us to a hall in Capulet's house, the feast itself. We get a brief glimpse of the bustling preparations and Capulet welcoming guests, reminiscing about his younger days.
And then, the pivotal moment, Romeo sees Juliet.
And boom, his previous lovesickness for Rosaline vanishes instantly. His language is breathtaking in its intensity and hyperbolic praise.
Like what? What does he say?
He declares, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright." He sees her beauty standing out like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, or a snowy dove trooping with crows. He asks, "Did my heart love till now? Forswear it, sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night."
Wow, so Rosaline is completely forgotten.
Instantly, it's a complete and immediate transformation.
But this moment of rapture is immediately met with danger. Tybalt hears Romeo's voice, recognizes the Montague presence, and is instantly enraged. He demands his rapier, intending to kill Romeo on the spot, believing it not a sin.
Predictable Tybalt, all fire and fury.
But surprisingly, Capulet stops him.
Yes, surprisingly. He tells Tybalt to content thee, calling Romeo a portly gentleman and saying he's heard Romeo is a virtuous and well-regarded youth in Verona.
Why would he do that? Defend a Montague.
Capulet explicitly forbids Tybalt from causing a scene, prioritizing his social standing and the peace of his feast over the immediate impulse of the feud. He says he wouldn't have Romeo harmed for the wealth of all the town. It's about appearances and control for him here.
Ah, okay. Protect the party's reputation.
Pretty much. Tybalt is forced to back down, but his resentment is palpable. He promises this intrusion, now seeming sweet, convert to bitter gall. We know this conflict with Tybalt isn't over, not by a long shot.
While Tybalt seethes, Romeo approaches Juliet. Their first conversation is famously written as a sonnet, a poetic form often used for love poems. Very clever structure.
It is. Romeo uses religious imagery, treating Juliet as a saint or shrine and his lips as pilgrims. Their exchange is witty and immediate, leading to their first kiss. Romeo feels his sin is purged by her lips, and Julia playfully suggests his sin is now on her, prompting a second kiss.
Smooth. Real smooth.
Oh yeah. The nurse interrupts, calling Juliet to her mother. This is when Romeo asks the nurse who Juliet's mother is. The revelation that Juliet is a Capulet hits him hard.
It's a crushing blow.
Exactly. His reaction is one of immediate despair. Is she a Capulet? Oh, dear account. My life is my foe's debt. The woman he instantly loves belongs to the family he is sworn to hate.
Meanwhile, Juliet asks the nurse about Romeo, and Benvolio identifies him as a Montague. Juliet's reaction mirrors Romeo's, expressing the central tragedy of their situation. My only love sprung from my only hate, too early seen unknown, and known too late.
She calls their love a prodigious birth, born from hate. The scene ends with the young lovers having found each other, only to discover the immense, seemingly insurmountable barrier of their family's feud.
And that powerful realization takes us into Act 2, which opens with the chorus giving us another summary. Bit of a recap.
Right. The chorus confirms that Romeo's old desire doth in his deathbed lie, referring to Rosaline, and his young affection gapes to be his heir. It reiterates the core problem. Their families are enemies, making open courtship impossible.
But it also hints at hope.
It does. It also highlights the force of their feelings, stating, passion lends them power, time means to meet, suggesting their intense love will find a way to overcome the obstacles, at least temporarily.
Okay, so passion versus obstacles. Act 2, scene I starts with Romeo leaving his friends, unable to go home when his heart is in the Capulet garden. He climbs the wall.
A classic romantic move. Benvolio and Mercutio look for him. Mercutio, unaware of Romeo's new love,
continues to tease him about Rosaline, using crude sexual language to conjure him.
Mercutio just doesn't let up, does he?
Never. This really shows Mercutio's character witty, bawdy, and cynical about romantic love, contrasting sharply with the idealized love Romeo has just found. It also highlights the immediate disconnect between Romeo and his friends. His world has changed, but they are still referencing his old lovesickness.
They're still stuck on Rosaline while he's moved away past her.
Exactly. They give up looking for him, leaving Romeo alone in the Capulet garden.
Which leads us to Act 2, Scene 2, the famous balcony scene.
Indeed. Romeo's opening line, "He jests at scars that never felt a wound," immediately tells us he's moved past Mercutio's teasing about Rosaline.
Yeah.
That's old news.
Juliet appears above at a window, and Romeo delivers one of the most iconic soliloquies in literature. He sees her as a source of light and beauty, comparing her to the sun rising in the east.
He elevates her to a celestial level, saying her eyes are so bright they would shame the stars. This shows the depth and idealized nature of his new love. It's incredibly poetic.
Then Juliet speaks her famous lines, unaware Romeo is listening. "Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" She's not asking his location, but questioning why his identity is tied to his family name, the enemy Montague.
Right, that wherefore means why, not where. A common mistake.
Good clarification. This explores the theme of names and identity. Juliet argues that a name is just an arbitrary label that doesn't define the person. Famously, she asks, "What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other name, would smell as sweet."
Such a powerful idea. She wishes he would deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if he won't, she will no longer be a Capulet if he swears his love. She believes Romeo himself is perfect, despite his hateful name.
She's willing to give up everything for him, based on this one encounter.
Pretty much. Romeo reveals himself, taking her at her word, promising to be new baptized and no longer Romeo if she calls him love.
That must have startled her.
Oh, definitely. Juliet is startled but recognizes his voice. Her immediate concern is his safety, noting the orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and discovery by her kinsman means death. Practical concerns kick in.
And Romeo's response? Probably not very practical.
Not at all. Classic romantic defiance. "With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out." He claims there's more danger in her eye than in her kinsman's swords, valuing his life only with her love.
He is all in. Juliet expresses embarrassment that he overheard her private thoughts. She asks if he loves her but distrusts vows, quoting that, "At lovers' perjuries, they say Jove laughs." She specifically asks him not to swear by the inconstant moon.
Smart girl, don't swear by something that changes all the time.
Right. Their dialogue is rapid and intense, covering vows, her concerns about the speed of their love being too rash, wanting it to grow like a bud.
Romeo seeks satisfaction, clarifying, he means, the exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. Juliet says she already gave him hers, and that her love is infinite. It's an incredibly passionate exchange.
And then reality intrudes.
Always. The nurse interrupts, calling Juliet from inside, a reminder of the outside world pressing in. When Juliet returns, she proposes marriage. "If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow, where and what time thou wilt perform the rite."
Whoa, straight to marriage. That was fast.
Extremely fast. She pledges to follow him anywhere. Their farewells are drawn out, filled with the sweetness and sorrow of their necessary parting. Juliet wishes it were 20 years until they meet again tomorrow. She uses the image of a pet bird pulled back on a string, wanting to keep Romeo close.
That image of the bird is quite striking.
It is. Their famous lines, "Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow," perfectly capture the bittersweet nature of their situation. Romeo's plan as he leaves is to seek help from Friar Lawrence.
The friar, the voice of, well, attempted reason.
We'll see. Act 2, Scene 3 takes us to Friar Lawrence's cell. The friar opens the scene with a soliloquy reflecting on the duality of nature, how plants can contain both medicinal virtue and poisonous potential.
Setting up some foreshadowing there, maybe.
Definitely. He applies this duality to people, noting that even good things can be misused, and vice can sometimes appear dignified. This contemplation foreshadows his own actions and their unintended tragic consequences.
Romeo arrives before dawn, surprising the friar. The friar assumes he's been up all night with Rosaline, still thinks it's about her.
Right. Romeo immediately dismisses Rosaline, saying he has forgot that name and that name's woe. He explains he's been feasting with his enemy and has been wounded by one who is wounded by him, meaning he and Juliet have fallen for each other. He uses that metaphor.
He gets straight to the point, asking the friar to marry him and Juliet that very day.
Yeah, no beating around the bush.
The friar is shocked by the speed of Romeo's new affection. He scolds him, saying his love for Rosaline was just doting, not for loving, like reading by rote without truly understanding.
He calls him out on his fickleness.
He does. Romeo argues that Juliet loves him in return, unlike Rosaline. Despite his serious doubts about Romeo's sincerity and the rashness of the request, Friar Lawrence agrees. His motivation is key. He hopes this marriage may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor to pure love.
So he sees it as a political move, almost, a way to end the feud.
That seems to be his primary justification. Acting with good intentions, hoping to end the feud, but perhaps underestimating the volatility of the situation and the families involved. A big maybe.
Okay, Act 2, Scene 4 is back on a street. Benvolio tells Mercutio that Tybalt has sent a challenge to Romeo. Mercutio is concerned about Romeo's lovesick state, believing he's too distracted by Rosaline to fight effectively. Still thinks it's Rosaline.
Still, Mercutio provides a sharp, mocking description of Tybalt as a skilled, formal duelist, calling him the Prince of Cats, referencing a character known for agility in fighting, and describing his precise, almost mechanical fighting style.
That Prince of Cats line is great, captures Tybalt's dangerous precision.
It really does. Romeo arrives, clearly transformed from his earlier melancholy. He engages in a rapid-fire, witty exchange with Mercutio, full of puns and clever wordplay. He's back to his old self, banter-wise.
Mercutio must be pleased.
He is. Mercutio notes the change with approval, saying Romeo is now sociable. Truly what thou art, by art as well as by nature. He prefers this quick-witted Romeo.
The nurse arrives looking for Romeo. Mercutio immediately targets her with bawdy jokes, calling her a bawd. He just can't resist.
Nope. Romeo intervenes and speaks privately with the nurse. She, showing her affection and protectiveness for Juliet, sternly warns Romeo not to deceive her or lead her into a fool's paradise, emphasizing that Juliet is young and this would be very weak dealing.
Good for the nurse. Looking out for Juliet.
She is. Romeo reassures her and gives her the plan. Juliet is to come to Friar Lawrence's cell that afternoon under the guise of shrift, confession, and they will be married there. He gives the nurse money for her help.
And the escape plan.
He also instructs her to wait behind the abbey wall for his man to bring a rope ladder so he can climb to Juliet's chamber that night. The nurse reveals Juliet's dislike for Paris, saying she'd had as lief see a toad, confirms Juliet's feelings there.
Act 2, Scene 5 is back in Capulets Garden, where Juliet is anxiously waiting for the nurse to return. She's been gone for 3 hours, and Juliet's monologue reflects her impatience, calling the old nurse unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead.
She contrasts the nurse's slowness with the speed at which love should move. The nurse finally arrives, and in a moment of comedic relief that heightens Juliet's tension, she deliberately delays the news, complaining about her aches and pains before finally revealing the plan. Classic nurse.
Making Juliet sweat it out.
Exactly. The final scene of Act 2, Scene 6, takes place at Friar Lawrence's cell, where Romeo and the friar await Juliet for the wedding. Before she arrives, the friar offers a crucial warning and a piece of advice that serves as powerful foreshadowing.
What does he say this time?
He cautions Romeo, "These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die, like fire and powder, which as they kiss, consume." He uses the analogy of rich honey being too much for the appetite.
Wow. That's pretty direct. Violent delights have violent ends.
Very direct. His advice is, therefore love moderately. Long love doth so. Too swift arrives as tardy is too slow. It's a direct warning against the speed and intensity that has defined Romeo and Juliet's relationship.
Advice they clearly don't take.
Not at all. Juliet arrives, and the marriage takes place, although the text doesn't explicitly show the full ceremony, implying it through their presence with the friar and the events that follow.
So Act 2 concludes with Romeo and Juliet secretly married, defying the structures of their families. But the warnings from the prologue, Mercutio, and now the friar hang heavy, suggesting their violent delights are on a dangerous path.
Absolutely. Which brings us to Act 3, often considered the turning point where fate, or perhaps poor choices, deals a devastating hand. Scene sees back in a public place, mirroring the opening scene, reinforcing the cyclical nature of the violence.
Deja vu. Benvolio, sensing the rising tension on a hot day, tries to get Mercutio to leave the streets to avoid encountering the Capulets, fearing the mad blood stirring. Mercutio, however, is in a provocative mood, as usual.
He thrives on it. Tybalt enters, explicitly looking for Romeo. Mercutio immediately engages him, escalating the situation with wordplay and challenges.
Romeo arrives, having just married Juliet. He attempts to de-escalate, calling Tybalt good Capulet and saying he has reason to love thee that Tybalt doesn't understand. He urges Tybalt to be satisfied, trying to keep the peace because they're family now, sort of.
Right, but that attempt at peace is tragically misunderstood by Mercutio, who sees it as a cowardly submission, calm, dishonorable, vile submission, and challenges Tybalt himself. He just can't stand Romeo backing down.
So Mercutio jumps in.
He does. They fight. And Romeo, trying desperately to stop them, steps between them. In the chaos, Tybalt stabs Mercutio under Romeo's arm.
Oh no, well, Romeo was trying to help.
Exactly. Mercutio's dying words are a mix of his characteristic wit and a bitter prophetic curse. "'Tis not so deep as a well, but 'tis enough 'twill serve." His central curse falls upon both families, a plague of both your houses. He blames their feud and Romeo's intervention for his death.
That line, a plague of both your houses, it's so central.
It really is. It lands the blame squarely on the conflict itself and foreshadows the deaths to come. Romeo is devastated and enraged by Mercutio's death. He feels his new love has made him effeminate, weakening his resolve, and that Tybalt should have died instead.
Guilt hits him hard.
Immensely.
Yeah.
When Tybalt returns, Romeo's grief and anger override his attempts at peace. He fights Tybalt for vengeance and kills him.
So much for peace, he kills Juliet's cousin.
Right after marrying her. Benvolio recognizes the gravity of the situation. Romeo has killed the prince's kinsman and a Capulet shortly after the prince's death decree. He urges Romeo to flee before the prince arrives.
Get out of there, now!
The prince arrives with the families. Lady Capulet immediately demands Romeo's life. Benvolio recounts the events truthfully, explaining Tybalt killed Mercutio, and Romeo killed Tybalt in revenge.
Montague argues Romeo acted in self-defense against the man who killed Mercutio, his kinsman. The prince, having lost his own kinsman in the brawl, Mercutio, but acknowledging Romeo killed the man who killed Mercutio, issues his judgment. Banishment. Immediately we do exile him hence.
Banishment. Not death, but...
But for Romeo, separation from Juliet feels like a fate worse than death.
Exactly.
Act 3, Scene 2, finds Juliet in a room in Capulet's house, eagerly anticipating Romeo's visit that night. Her soliloquy is filled with vivid imagery, calling her knight to come quickly.
Waiting for her husband.
Yes. She imagines Romeo's death and asking for him to be cut into little stars that would make the heavens beautiful, showing her intense focus on him. It's beautiful, but also a bit morbid.
The nurse arrives with the rope ladder Romeo sent, but her news is confused and full of grief, making Juliet fear Romeo is dead.
That confusion must have been torture for Juliet. Absolutely. When the nurse clarifies that Tybalt is dead and Romeo killed him and that Romeo is banished, Juliet's reaction is complex. She initially uses oxymorons to describe Romeo, oh, serpent heart, hid with a flowering face, expressing her pain that her beloved killed her cousin.
That internal conflict. How can someone so beautiful do something so terrible?
But her grief quickly turns to Romeo's banishment, which she sees as worse than the death of her entire family. Romeo is banished, to speak that word, is father, mother, Tybalt, Romeo, Juliet, all slain, all dead. Banishment means the death of her world with Romeo.
For her, it's the end of everything. She laments the unused rope ladder, a symbol of their thwarted union. The nurse tells her Romeo is hiding at Friar Lawrence's, weeping. Juliet sends the nurse with a ring, a token of her love, asking Romeo to come say a last farewell.
A final meeting before exile.
Yeah.
Act 3, Scene the Third is back at Friar Lawrence's cell, where the friar informs Romeo of his banishment. Romeo's reaction is one of utter despair.
Predictably dramatic. He sees banishment as a fate worse than death, saying, "There is no world without Verona walls, but purgatory, torture, hell itself." He envies lesser creatures like flies who can remain in Verona near Juliet.
He's not handling it well.
Not at all. His despair is so great he attempts suicide with his dagger. Friar Lawrence stops him and delivers a scathing rebuke, calling Romeo a fond madman, accusing him of womanish tears and acting with the unreasonable fury of a beast.
The friar really lays into him.
He does. He scolds him for misusing his gifts, his physical form, his love, his intelligence, comparing them to precious things ruined by misuse. He reminds Romeo of the blessings he still has. Juliet is alive, he killed Tybalt who would have killed him, and he was banished, not executed, trying to give him perspective.
Okay, so what's the plan now?
The friar then proposes a plan. Romeo should go to Juliet that night as planned, but leave for Mantua before dawn. He is to wait there while the friar will announce the marriage, reconcile the families, and gain a pardon from the prince, allowing Romeo to return later.
This sounds optimistic, maybe a bit naive.
Very optimistic. The nurse arrives with Juliet's ring, finding Romeo on the ground in despair.
The ring and the news that Juliet still loves him revive Romeo's spirit. He prepares to go to Juliet, reminded by the friar to leave for Mantua by daybreak.
One last night. Meanwhile, Act 3, Scene the Fourth, shifts abruptly to a room in Capulet's house, focusing on the family's response to recent events. Capulet, Lady Capulet, and Paris discuss Juliet's grief, which they believe is for Tybalt, still think it's about Tybalt.
Yep. In an impulsive decision, perhaps to cheer her up or impose order after the chaos, Capulet decides to arrange her marriage to Paris immediately. He is completely confident in his authority, stating, "I think she will be ruled in all respects by me, nay more, I doubt it not."
Oh, this is bad timing. Really bad timing.
Horrible. He promises Paris she will be his wife and sets the wedding for Wednesday, then impulsively moves it forward to Thursday when Paris wishes it were sooner. Lady Capulet is tasked with informing Juliet the next morning. This decision, made without Juliet's knowledge or consent, directly conflicts with her secret marriage and sets up the next major crisis.
He has no idea what he's just done.
Absolutely none. And this leads us to Act 3, Scene 5, an open gallery to Juliet's chamber, where Romeo and Juliet spend their wedding night before his banishment. The scene is filled with poignant sorrow.
A goodbye scene.
Yes. As dawn approaches, they have the heartbreaking debate about whether the bird singing is the nightingale, symbolizing night, allowing Romeo to stay, or the lark, symbolizing morning, demanding his departure. Juliet desperately wishes it were the nightingale.
Trying to hold on to time.
Desperately.
Oh.
Romeo, recognizing the danger, states he must leave and live, or stay and die. When Juliet tries to deny the morning light, Romeo, showing his deep love and willingness to face death for her, says he will stay if she wishes.
That forces her hand.
It does. This makes Juliet immediately insist he must go. Their farewells are filled with sorrow and promises. Juliet experiences a chilling premonition, an ill-divining soul, seeing Romeo as he descends, as one dead in the bottom of a tomb.
More foreshadowing. Heavy stuff.
Very heavy. The nurse rushes in, warning that Lady Capulet is coming and the day has broken. Romeo descends and leaves for Mantua.
And then Lady Capulet arrives.
Right on cue, Lady Capulet enters, finding Juliet weeping, still believing it's for Tybalt. She proposes sending someone to Mantua to poison Romeo to avenge Tybalt.
Whoa, she's ruthless.
She is. Juliet responds with brilliant doublespeak, using words that sound like hatred and desire for vengeance to her mother, but which express her love and grief for Romeo. For instance, she says she will never be satisfied with Romeo till I behold him dead, meaning her heart is vexed until she sees him, who is effectively dead to her due to banishment. Very clever wordplay under pressure.
She's walking a tightrope. Lady Capulet then announces the planned marriage to Paris on Thursday. Juliet's reaction is immediate and vehement refusal. "He shall not make me there a joyful bride." She declares she will not marry Paris, preferring Romeo.
The mask drops. She can't pretend anymore.
Capulet enters, sees Juliet's tears, and is informed of her refusal. His rage is explosive and abusive. He calls Juliet names like disobedient wretch, baggage, and tallow face.
It's brutal. The caring father from Act 1 is completely gone.
Totally gone. He threatens to disown her and drag her to the church if she doesn't obey. His fury is directed even at the nurse when she tries to defend Juliet.
Abandoned by her parents, Juliet turns to the nurse for advice. This leads to another devastating betrayal. The nurse, seeing the insurmountable situation, advises Juliet to marry Paris, disparaging Romeo as effectively useless now that he is banished.
Oh, nurse, how could you?
It's pragmatic maybe from her perspective, but for Juliet, it's the ultimate betrayal. Juliet feels utterly betrayed by the nurse who is privy to her secret marriage. She calls the nurse ancient damnation and resolves to trust her no longer.
She's completely alone now.
Utterly alone. Feeling completely isolated and without options from her family or confidant, Juliet decides she must seek help from Friar Lawrence, concluding with the desperate thought, "If all else fail, myself have power to die."
Chilling. And that brings us to Act 4, where desperate measures are indeed taken. Seeing Vars at Friar Lawrence's cell. Paris is there, discussing the hurried wedding date now, Thursday, with the friar. He explains Capulet's reason is to lift Juliet's grief over Tybalt. The friar notes the haste, knowing the true impediment.
The friar's stuck in the middle now. Juliet arrives and encounters Paris. Their dialogue highlights Juliet's struggle. She uses careful, ambiguous language that Paris interprets as veiled affection while she means something else entirely. Her line, "It may be so, for it is not mine own," in response to Paris claiming her face is his, reveals her sense that her identity belongs to Romeo.
More clever deflection. Paris leaves, and Juliet, in utter despair, tells the friar she will kill herself if he cannot help her avoid marrying Paris. She shows him a knife, proving her resolve. She's serious.
Absolutely.
Friar Lawrence, seeing her desperation, proposes a dangerous kind of hope, requiring as desperate an execution as her willingness to die.
The potion plan.
Exactly. Juliet's declarations of willingness are extreme and vivid. She would face horrors like leaping from a tower, walking with serpents, being chained with bears, or hiding in a tomb with rattling bones rather than marry Paris. She'll do anything.
So the friar lays out the plan.
Based on her absolute resolve, the friar presents his plan. Juliet must go home, act merry, and agree to marry Paris. On Wednesday night, she must be alone and drink the contents of a vial he gives her.
And the potion will?
He describes the potion's effects. It will make her appear dead for 42 hours. Her pulse will stop. Her flesh will be cold and stiff, her eyes closed.
Faking her own death. Risky.
Extremely. The plan continues. She will be found, assumed dead, and taken to the Capulet family vault. The friar will send a letter to Romeo in Mantua, informing him of the plan. Romeo will return to Verona, and he and the friar will be there when she wakes, and they will escape together to Mantua.
So many things have to go right for this to work.
Precisely. Juliet agrees immediately, saying, "Love, give me strength," and takes the vial.
Act 4, Scene 2 shifts to Hall and Capulet's house, showing wedding preparations bustling forward, a stark contrast to Juliet's state. Capulet is enthusiastic and overseeing everything. He's oblivious.
Completely. Juliet returns from the friar's cell, following the plan, acting merry, and apologizing to her father, saying the friar has taught her obedience.
Playing her part.
Perfectly. Capulet is overjoyed by this apparent change of heart. In his excitement, he makes a fateful, impulsive decision. He moves the wedding forward to Wednesday tomorrow.
No, that messes up the whole timeline.
Exactly. Lady Capulet notes how little time this leaves, but Capulet is confident he can handle everything. This change in the timeline is critical. It shortens the window for the friar's letter to reach Romeo and directly contributes to the plan's failure. A catastrophic mistake born of happiness.
Unbelievable. Act 4, Scene 3 takes us to Juliet's chamber, where she is alone, preparing to take the potion. She asks her mother and the nurse to leave her that night, pretending she needs to pray, isolating herself for the dangerous act.
Her soliloquy before drinking the potion is terrifying and revealing. She confronts her deepest fears about the plan. You really feel her terror.
What are her main fears?
First, the fear that the potion won't work, leaving her forced to marry Paris. She places a dagger beside her as a backup, stating, "No, no, this shall forbid it."
Okay, contingency plan.
Second, the fear that the friar, for some reason, gave her actual poison to cover his involvement. She considers this but dismisses it, believing him to be a holy man, trusts him, despite the risk.
And the third fear.
Third, and most horrifying, the fear of waking too early in the tomb before Romeo arrives. She vividly imagines the suffocating air, the loathsome smells, the piles of bones, the sight of bleeding Tybalt, spirits of her ancestors, and possibly going mad among the horrors, perhaps seeing Tybalt's ghost. It's a truly gothic vision of terror.
That's intense, but she still drinks it.
She does. Despite these terrifying visions, her resolve holds. With Romeo in mind, she drinks the potion, saying, "Romeo, I come, this do I drink to thee." An act of love and desperation.
Act 4, Scene 4, shows the early morning wedding preparations continuing downstairs, oblivious to Juliet's state. Capulet is still excited and sleepless. There's lighthearted banter among the servants and between Lady Capulet and the nurse. Just normal life going on.
Total contrast. Paris arrives with musicians, and Capulet eagerly sends the nurse to wake Juliet. This brief scene provides a snark, ironic contrast between the festive bustle below and the stage death taking place above.
Act 4, Scene 4 is the scene of discovery in Juliet's chamber. The nurse enters to wake Juliet using playful, affectionate calls. Mistress, lamb, bride.
Her playful mood turns to horror as she finds Juliet seemingly dead, crying out, "She's dead, deceased, she's dead!" Lady Capulet and Capulet enter and express overwhelming grief. Real grief this time.
How does Capulet react?
Capulet uses a powerful metaphor to describe Juliet's death, saying, "Death lies on her like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field." He personifies death, calling him his son-in-law, who has lain with thy bride. It's strangely poetic grief.
Paris arrives with the friar and musicians, ready for the wedding, only to be met with the news of Juliet's death. Capulet announces the tragedy, repeating the idea that death has deflowered his daughter, turning wedding plans into funeral plans.
Instantly. Friar Lawrence, knowing the truth but maintaining the pretense, offers conventional comfort, telling them Juliet is better off in heaven and urging them to prepare for the funeral. He has to keep up the act.
The scene ends with a dark, almost absurd comedic interlude between Peter and the musicians, who are told not to play happy music and engage in wordplay about sad songs, dumps, and musicians playing for money, silver. It highlights the strange mix of grief and everyday reality. A bit jarring.
It is. So Act 4 ends with everyone believing Juliet is dead, entombed in the Capulet vault, setting the stage for the tragic final act where the miscommunication and unfortunate timing will lead to the play's devastating conclusion.
And that takes us to Act V, the bitter end. Scene Her is in Mantua, a street, where Romeo is in exile. The scene opens with Romeo feeling unusually cheerful after a dream where he dreamt Juliet found him dead and revived him with kisses, a moment heavy with dramatic irony, as the audience knows she is currently appearing dead.
Oh, that's cruel irony. Balthazar arrives from Verona. Romeo eagerly asks for news of Juliet. Balthazar delivers the devastating but incorrect news that she is well, and nothing can be ill. Her body sleeps in Capel's monument, and her immortal part with angels lives. He tells Romeo he saw her buried.
The worst possible news, delivered as if it's good news.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Romeo's reaction is immediate and absolute defiance of what he perceives as cruel fate. Is it even so? Then I defy you, stars. He resolves to return to Verona that night to die in Juliet's tomb and lie with her.
No hesitation, just action.
Immediate resolve. Crucially, he asks Balthazar if he has letters from the friar. Balthazar says no. This is the critical failure in communication. The letter explained the potion plan never reached Romeo. The linchpin fails.
Balthazar, seeing Romeo's wild grief and resolve, fears some misadventure and tries to dissuade him, but Romeo dismisses him. He's on a mission now.
A deadly one. Romeo immediately decides he needs poison. He remembers seeing a poor apothecary and seeks him out, describing his meager shop and starving appearance, noting that his poverty makes him likely to break the law.
Find someone desperate enough to sell it.
Precisely. Romeo bribes the apothecary with 40 ducats for a potent, fast-acting poison. The apothecary states clearly that Mantua's law forbids selling such drugs under penalty of death, but confesses, "My poverty, but not my will," consents.
Poverty voices his hand.
It does. Romeo pays him, calling the gold worse poison to men's souls, arguing that wealth is more destructive than the apothecary's drugs. He takes the poison, ironically calling it a cordial, and sets off for Verona, determined to die by Juliet's side.
Act 5, Scene 6 is back at Friar Lawrence's cell, where we learn precisely why the crucial letter failed to reach Romeo. Friar John, tasked with delivering it, arrives.
The explanation. Friar Lawrence asks if Romeo received the letter. Friar John explains that he was supposed to deliver it with another friar, but they were suspected of being in a quarantine house due to the plague. They were locked inside, unable to leave or send the letter via another messenger.
The plague, just pure bad luck, intervened.
Terrible, uncontrollable fate. Friar Lawrence is horrified by the news, understanding the dire import of the letter and the danger of its failure. He realizes Juliet will wake in the tomb within 3 hours, and Romeo knows nothing of the plan, believing her truly dead.
He knows disaster is imminent.
He does. He resolves to go to the monument alone immediately, to be there when Juliet wakes, write another letter to Mantua, and keep Juliet safely at his cell until Romeo arrives. He refers to Juliet chillingly as a poor living corpse closed in a dead man's tomb. Too late, though.
Act 5, Scene 3 is the final tragic scene. A churchyard. In it, a monument belonging to the Capulets. It's night, and Paris arrives first with his page, planning to mourn Juliet privately with flowers and tears. He sends his page away, but tells him to watch for anyone approaching, still acting the grieving fiancé.
Yes. Paris pays tribute to Juliet at the tomb. The page whistles, signaling someone is coming, and Paris hides.
Romeo and Balthazar arrive with tools to open the tomb. Romeo gives Balthazar a letter for his father, containing his confession, and orders him away, threatening violence if he returns.
Balthazar leaves, but hides nearby, concerned by Romeo's wild demeanor. Romeo begins forcing open the tomb, addressing it as a monstrous mouth he will fill with more dead bodies, referring to himself. Dark imagery.
Paris recognizes Romeo as the banished Montague who killed Tybalt, and, believing this grief caused Juliet's death, confronts him, calling him a villain and a criminal desecrating the tomb. He thinks Romeo is there to vandalize.
A fatal misunderstanding. Romeo tries to warn Paris off, explaining he is there not to harm but to die. "By heaven, I love thee better than myself, for I come hither armed against myself." He begs Paris to leave.
But Paris won't listen.
No. Paris refuses and attempts to apprehend Romeo. They fight, and the page runs to call the watch. Romeo kills Paris. Paris's dying wish is to be laid with Juliet, another casualty of misunderstanding.
Romeo recognizes Paris as Mercutio's kinsman and the man Juliet was meant to marry. He grants Paris's dying wish, laying him in the tomb, calling the vault a lantern because Juliet's beauty fills it with light. Even in death, her beauty illuminates.
Romeo sees Juliet's body. He notes with wonder that she's not pale. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks. This is the sign she's out to wake, but Romeo, blinded by grief and the darkness of the tomb, misinterprets it, wondering if death is keeping her beauty. The ultimate tragic timing.
He's so close to realizing she's alive.
Agonizingly close. He resolves to stay with her forever, saying, Here will I remain. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. He explicitly blames fate, the inauspicious stars, for his tragic life.
Blaming the stars, he bids a final farewell to his senses and body, drinks the poison, here's to my love, praises the apothecary for providing quick-acting drugs, kisses Juliet, and dies.
Just heartbreaking. Friar Lawrence arrives moments after, finding Balthazar hiding. Balthazar tells him Romeo is in the vault. The friar enters and finds the bodies of Paris and Romeo. He's too late.
And then the plan's timing goes tragically awry. Juliet wakes.
Right on schedule, but tragically late. Oh, comfortable friar, where's my lord? She expects Romeo and the friar to be there.
Friar Lawrence briefly explains that Romeo and Paris are dead and urges her to come away quickly as the watch is coming. But when he hears the noise of the approaching watch, he flees, abandoning Juliet in the tomb.
He panics, leaves her alone with the bodies.
Juliet sees Romeo, the bodies, and the empty vial. She realizes he drank poison. She tries to kiss some poison from his lips to join him in death, but it's not enough. Thy lips are warm.
Another agonizing detail. Hearing the watch closer and refusing to leave Romeo, she finds his dagger. Calling it, "Oh, happy dagger," she stabs herself and dies upon Romeo's body, choosing death with him over life without him.
The final act of love and despair.
The watch arrives, finds the bodies of Paris, Romeo, and Juliet, and secures the scene. The prince, Capulets, and Montagues are summoned. Lady Capulet notes the dagger's strange placement in Juliet's breast, with its sheath on Romeo's back, symbolizing how the instrument meant for him ended up killing her.
The pieces start coming together.
Friar Lawrence, Balthazar, and the page are brought before the prince. The friar confesses the entire sequence of events, explaining the secret marriage, Tybalt's death, Romeo's banishment, Capulet forcing marriage to Paris, the potion plan, the critical failure of the letter delivery due to the plague, his arrival just too late, and Juliet killing herself after he fled. Spills everything.
The whole sad story.
Balthazar and the page corroborate their parts of the story, confirming Romeo's grief, his letter, Paris's presence, and the fight. The prince reads Romeo's letter to Montague, which confirms the friar's confession, Romeo's love for Juliet, buying poison, and his intent to die and be buried with her. All the evidence lines up.
So the truth is out. The prince delivers his final judgment, addressing the heads of the warring families. He declares that the death of their children is a punishment, a scourge sent by heaven upon their hate.
He doesn't mince words. He also includes himself in the blame, having lost a brace of kinsmen, Mercutio and Paris, for having been too lenient, for winking at your discords. His stark conclusion is, all are punished.
Everyone shares the blame.
That's his verdict. Capulet and Montague finally reconcile, shaking hands. Capulet calls Juliet's death his jointure, his only wealth. Montague promises a statue of Juliet in gold, matched by Capulet with one for Romeo, acknowledging them as poor sacrifices of our enmity. Too little, too late.
A monument to their failure.
Essentially. The prince's closing lines reflect the tragedy. A glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show his head. He states they will further discuss the sad events, deciding who will be pardoned and who punished.
And the play ends with the iconic lines, "For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo."
And that journey through the text, from the opening street brawl to the tragic scene in the tomb, really lays bare how the ancient hate, combined with impulsive youth, unfortunate chance, the illiterate servant, the plague quarantine, miscommunication, and the failures of the adults around them, conspired to create such a devastating outcome. It's just layer upon layer of tragedy.
Circling back to our source, it's remarkable how this entire complex tragedy is contained within this freely available electronic text from Project Gutenberg. It stands as a powerful testament to the work of making these foundational works of literature accessible to everyone.
Yes, the text itself serves as a reminder of their mission, available at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever, encouraging us to engage directly with these classic stories. It's great that resources like that exist.
Absolutely. To leave you with a thought for your own deep dive into the play, consider the prince's final words, all are punished. In your reading of the text, was everyone truly equally guilty? How much was the tragedy driven by inevitable fate, the star-crossed lovers, versus the specific, flawed choices made by the characters and the adults around them at each critical turn?
It's a question that resonates long after the final curtain falls. Fate versus free will, hate versus love. It's all in there.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet on the Uncanny Valley podcast. Thank you for listening.